from London. Many thanks for joining us this evening, Haid.
Thank you.
So Russia says the US has not kept its end of the deal when it comes to this ceasefire. What exactly do they mean by that? And is there any way of knowing if what they're saying is true or not?
Well, let's start with the flaws that this ceasefire has from the very beginning, and this is why people were skeptical about the success of such a ceasefire. First of all, there is no reinforcement mechanisms in order to assure the implementation of this ceasefire. The second thing is that there is no independent observers, and that answers your questions, because you have the Russians saying something and then the rebels on the ground saying something else, and then who will be able to verify what's happening there? And then the last thing is that there is no transparency in revealing the conditions of the full conditions of the ceasefire, and this is why rebels on the grounds are not happy at all with the conditions. But at least to some aspects, we are 100% sure about who is to blame. The UN envoy to Syria, the Mistura, said that the Syrian regime is the one who is not allowing aid convoys to be to deliver aid to besieged areas, and this is clear that the regime is responsible for that.
Well, why are they not letting the aid through?
Because starvation is one of the most lethal weapons that the Syrian regime has been using from the beginning. And besieging Aleppo will not be useful if aid is able to deliver, is easily delivered to those who are in the besieged area in the eastern part of Aleppo. So for the regime, on the long term, to be able to control and take over that part of Aleppo, he has to starve people there to death in order for them to surrender and leave the area. And this is why, for the regime, it's essential that aid should not be delivered to those people so they can give up and leave that area.
Now, Russia seems to be the only one really with influence when it comes to the Syrian regime, but they still have a very different agenda to the US. These are the two sort of powerful parties here. With these different agendas, is there any way that we will see some sort of clarity emerging, some sort of peace in the future? Will there ever be any compromise?
Well, so far, I think let's start with how much influence the Russians have on Assad. I think this is something that everyone assumes, but we till now cannot verify the extent of this influence. The Russians are the ones who brokered this deal. Until now, they were not able to influence Assad, or at least pressure Assad to allow aid in. And that's the easiest part of it. So how can we believe that the Russians will be able later on to pressure Assad to at least agree to any political solution that they could achieve or reach with the Americans?
You say that, but without Russian help, surely the Syrian regime wouldn't have managed to become as successful as it has in terms of the fight in Syria against the rebels.
You are totally right, but the Syrian regime as well knows that the Russians cannot just abandon the regime now, because he's serving their interests as well. And this is why it's always this kind of tango dance between the Russians and the Syrian regime.